with some of our attendees meeting in person at Friendly House. Want to welcome them and others joining us virtually on Zoom. I am so glad you're here this morning. Today is a commingling of many traditions, whether it's your tradition on this day to celebrate the season of renewal by hiding candy eggs or wearing festive hats, Easter dinner, Passover Seder, Ramadan fasting, or walking among the spring flowers. If you have joined us today, I would like to sincerely welcome you to the Sunday morning meeting of the Humanists of Greater Portland. Our topic at today's meeting is secular rescue and the plight of the blasphemous. We'll be addressing most of the humanist commitments, but especially social justice. And Al Christians is our reader today, and I'm going to welcome him in, and he's sitting right beside me.
Okay, our reading today is on account of Helen woke me up this morning and said, nobody signed up to do the reading. Now, I've been telling you folks to do the readings. I'm going to do a reading that is going to explain to you the possible joys of standing up in front of a group and addressing it. Sign up. I'm going to talk to you about William Jennings Bryan. He was, for 12 years of the meat of the progressive era, the leading progressive in the United States and the leader of the progressives in the United States, a man of great importance. And William Jennings Bryan, on July 9, 1896, the name of Bryan meant nothing to probably 999 out of every 1,000 people in the United States, according to this book, which I'm reading from.
Yeah.
And that was the day he went to the Democratic National Convention to give a speech. And here's what happened when he stood to address the group. Until now, there had spoken no man to whom that riotous assembly would listen with respect. But at this moment, there appeared upon the platform Mr. William Jennings Bryan of Nebraska as he confronted the 20,000 yelling, cursing, shouting men before him. They felt at once that indescribable magnetic thrill which beasts and men alike experience in the presence of a master. Serene and self-possessed, and with a smile upon his lips, he faced the roaring multitude with a splendid consciousness of power. Before a single word had been uttered by him, the pandemonium sank to an inarticulate murmur, and when he began to speak, even this was hushed to the profoundest silence. A mellow, penetrating voice that reached, apparently without the slightest effort, to the farthermost recesses of that enormous hall, gave utterance to a brief exordium. The repose and grateful dignity of his manner, the courteousness, reference to his opponents, and the perfect clearness and simplicity of his language riveted the attention of every man and woman in the convention hall. He spoke with the utmost deliberation, so that every word was driven home to each hearer's consciousness, and yet with an ever-increasing force which fit expression in the wonderful harmony and power of his voice. His sentences rang out, now with an accent of superb disdain, and now with the stirring challenge of a bugle call. The great hall seemed to rock and sway with the fierce energy and shout that ascended from 20,000 throats. The leaderless democracy of the West was leaderless no more. Throughout the latter part of his address, a crash of applause had followed every sentence, but now the tumult was like that of a great sea of thundering against dikes. 20,000 men and women went mad with an irresistible enthusiasm. This orator had met their mood to the very full. He had found magic words for the feeling which they had been unable to express. And so he played at will upon their very heartstrings until the full tide of their emotion was let loose in one tempestuous roar of passion. A grand procession started around the delegates' enclosure. Bryan was hoisted upon the shoulders of his followers and carried with it. It was fully 35 minutes before quiet was restored. And that is how a man who was a retired congressman, 9 years younger than any man who had ever become president, managed to win 3 of 4 consecutive Democratic national nominations for president, and after that, a term as Secretary of State. So if you want to start on that career, sign up and do a reading and get started in public speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you so much. That was lovely and quite rousing. Matthew Cravatta is the coordinator of the Center for Inquiry's Secular Rescue Program. He's also the print manager for the Center for Inquiry located in Amherst, New York. His duties include Director of Direct Mail Operations for Free Inquiry and Skeptical Inquirer magazines. Matthew graduated with honors from the State University of New York in Fredonia. And today he will be speaking on a very important topic, secular rescue and the plight of the blasphemous. Welcome, Matthew. Come on in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Good morning, all you free thinkers and humanists and all my new friends associated with the Humanists of Greater Portland. It's an honor to be speaking with you today. I trust you're all doing well, and thanks for being here to witness. Before I proceed, I'd just like to take a minute to thank Helen Christians and Joyce Lackey, and I hope I'm pronouncing those names correctly, and the entire team at HGP for this opportunity today to speak with you and your group about the Center for Inquiry Secular Rescue Program. You've been very gracious and welcoming and kind, and I appreciate this invitation to be with you here. Thank you, Portland. This morning, I intend to provide you with some historical background on the Secular Rescue Program, as well as my own involvement in it. But first, so you have some sense of who I am, allow me just a couple of minutes to introduce myself a little bit deeper. My name is Matt Cravatta, and I'm the coordinator of the Secular Rescue Program, among my many other duties. I've been working at the Center for Inquiry since 2003 in various capacities, beginning as the executive assistant to the founder, Paul Kurtz, who had recruited me away from my editorial position at Prometheus Books, which in its heyday was the preeminent publishing house of freethought, atheist, philosophy, and scientific naturalism-based books here in the United States. Like the Center for Inquiry, Prometheus Books was located in suburban Buffalo, New York, which is where I was born and raised. My parents were old school Roman Catholics, and my family, I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters, were all raised as such until around the early to mid 1970s, when first my mother and then everyone else converted to evangelical born-again Christianity and began attending church services at a local Assembly of God, which coincidentally is located just down the street from Center for Inquiry headquarters. My religious skepticism was always lurking, and I asked a zillion questions about God and heaven, all of it, as most kids do, I imagine. Over a long period of time, my faith and belief waned to the point of non-existence. And when I started working at the Center for Inquiry, my skepticism about supernaturalism deepened even further. And that's when my secular humanism solidified. I worked for Paul Kurtz until 2009, and then took over as the print manager and list rental manager at CFI headquarters when he retired. Print operations work that I still do to this day, alongside my extensive work at Secular Rescue, which is somewhat all-consuming. I've been the director / coordinator since November of 2017. I take great pride to be associated with this life-saving and humanitarian effort for the sake of those whom we serve, primarily ex-Muslims, or persecuted ex-Muslims, reluctant secular activists, and forthright atheist rights advocates. Occasionally, we see a few ex-Christians at the door, a Hindu or 2, but for the most part, our cases are ex-Muslims and lifelong atheists heralding from Muslim nations. Other than my semi-annual presentations to the CFI Board of Directors, including our CEO and executive directors, from whom I receive enormous support for this work, I don't often get a chance to engage with our network of supporters out there, humanists and non-believers such as yourselves. But when I was invited to speak to your group, I jumped at the opportunity to do so. partly because of the enormous importance of the secular rescue program, but also because of my love and fondness for Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, of which I am quite familiar. In 2013 or so, my mate, her name is Donna, my mate and I, we moved to Denver, Colorado from Western New York, partly on a whim. We were keen to see the West and take in new adventures. And after a year plus in downtown Denver, which we enjoyed very much, we found ourselves moving to Washington State, specifically to the Tri-Cities region of Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland. We lived in West Richland on an acre property with sheep next door and chickens. We loved it. We loved it. Over the course of our 16 months in the deserts of Eastern Washington, yes, deserts, we experienced numerous days over 100 degrees, experienced dust storms, and saw lots of black widow spiders. And I used to spend nearly every morning removing tumbleweeds that used to mysteriously roll into the yard overnight. And over the course of our time there, we used to drive west to the coast as often as we could, either driving down the north side of the Columbia River on State Highway 14 through White Salmon and one of my favorite little towns, Stevenson, or we'd cross the river at Hermiston and then drive west on Highway 84 all the way to Portland and beyond, perhaps stopping in McMinnville after passing through the city as we headed to little coastal towns such as Seaside, Rockaway Beach, Natarts, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and Depot Bay, sometimes taking the Pacific Coast Highway all the way down to Bandon Beach and Brookings, ending up in Crescent City or Requa in Northern California, and getting to see the many wondrous places in between. We really fell in love with the area, and to this day, we still wax poetic about returning and staying for the remainder of our years. These days, we live about 20 minutes west of the city of Colorado Springs at nearly 8,000 feet elevation, excuse me, with Pikes Peak about 8 miles away as the crow flies. We certainly would not mind having Mount Hood in our backyard instead. From the Pacific Ocean to the eastern edge of Oregon, of your state, Oregon is truly extraordinary and beautiful. And my connection to the area motivated me a great deal to be with you here today. Again, thank you for having me. Now, for those of you just hearing about secular rescue for the very first time, allow me this opportunity to tell you about this vital Center for Inquiry program, which, when you get down to its core, is not just about protecting the basic human rights of freedom of religion, expression, and conscience, the freedom to believe or not believe, and perhaps freedoms my generation takes for granted. But the core of secular rescue is about saving lives that are often in grave danger because of blasphemy laws, extremist ideologies, and the people and governments who practice or support them. The program's history dates back to 2015, 2016, when the Center for Inquiry's Campaign for Free Expression, the precursor to secular rescue, launched the Freethought Emergency Fund to coincide with International Blasphemy Rights Day, which is celebrated in various fashions on September 30th each year. The Center for Inquiry actually established International Blasphemy Rights Day in 2009 as a way to show solidarity with those who have faced persecution or violence for expressing dissenting ideas, even and especially when those ideas are perceived as offensive. International Blasphemy Rights Day is also a day to stand in opposition to the global suppression on free speech. Long before the establishment of these protection and support programs, the Center for Inquiry was granted NGO status at the United Nations Human Rights Council, where we fiercely challenged blasphemy laws and the myriad ways by which free thinkers and non-believers are ostracized and persecuted. This is the same UN council that just booted Russia from participation because of its invasion and murders in Ukraine. Today, along with our program's case manager, Kat Parker, who she lives and works from her current home in the Melbourne, Australia area, Secular Rescue's hours of operation are nearly 20 hours a day, sometimes 7 days a week. When I am on, Kat is off. When she is on, I am off. During the gaps, we make use of encrypted communication software such as Signal, WhatsApp, and Telegram, which keeps our phones buzzing at all hours. Indeed, Kat can sometimes receive as many as 300 messages from cases over the course of a weekend. Occasionally, we work overlapping hours, which is when we discuss cases, evidence, strategies, aid transfers, visas, passports, legal issues, you name it. The two of us in coordination and neo-partnership with numerous other worldwide free thought protection organizations, work to defend the lives and rights of endangered secular activists wherever they may be. Though the vast majority of our work is concentrated in Muslim countries in the Middle East and North Africa, such as Pakistan, Iraq, Bangladesh, Jordan, Egypt, Yemen, and Afghanistan, to name just a few. In many of these countries, the basic rights that we enjoy here, such as freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion and freedom from religion, are routinely thwarted by the prevailing religious powers and the governments that back them. Their antagonism against non-believers is often by the utilization of existing blasphemy and digital security laws and statutes that squash dissent, freedom of inquiry, and religious choice. Indeed, many of the countries where we are engaged with secular activists, the notion of blasphemy, which the Oxford Dictionary defines as the act or offense of speaking sacrilegiously about God or sacred things, or apostasy, defined as the abandonment or renunciation of Islam. Typically, these are the main reasons free thinkers come to secular rescue for aid and guidance and more. And sometimes just a friendly, like-minded voice of reason and understanding. Laws that condemn and punish so-called blasphemous words and deeds are used to stop atheists, humanists, government critics, and even religious moderates from promoting basic human rights, including freedom of expression, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, gender equality, and the rights of the non-religious, all in the name of censoring the perceived insults of religious sentiments associated with the Islamic majority who make the rules. Secular rescue exists because of these inhumane blasphemy laws and dogmatic practices. For instance, take the country of Pakistan. According to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, in one of their recent reports, quotes sections 295 and 298 of Pakistan's penal code criminalizes acts and speech that insult a religion or religious beliefs or defile the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad, a place of worship, or religious symbols. These provisions inherently violate international standards of freedom of religion or belief, protecting beliefs over individuals. Accusers are not required to present proper evidence that blasphemy occurred, which leads to all kinds of abuse, including, of course, false accusations. In most cases, blasphemy laws are weaponized to suppress all kinds of dissent. They have become a tool of fear and oppression. Moreover, the law sets severe punishments, including death or life in prison. And according to a recent Freedom of Thought report published by our good friends at Humanists International, in Pakistan, expression of core humanist principles on democracy, freedom, and human rights is brutally repressed. Blasphemy or criticism of religion is outlawed and punishable by death. The right to freedom of expression, including media freedom, is frequently violated. Expression of non-religious views is severely persecuted or is rendered almost impossible by severe social stigma, or is highly likely to be met with hatred or violence. Furthermore, it is made difficult to register or operate an explicitly humanist, atheist, secularist, or other non-religious NGO or other human rights organization, while government figures or state agencies openly marginalize, harass, or incite hatred or violence against the non-religious. And finally, there is a pattern of impunity or collusion in violence by non-state actors against the non-religious. That same report ranks Taliban-ruled Afghanistan very poorly, as you can imagine. A great many of our cases originate from there these days. And the report states that expression of core humanist principles on democracy, freedom, and human rights is brutally repressed. Apostasy or conversion from a specific religion is outlawed and punishable by death. Blasphemy or criticism of religion is also outlawed and punishable by death. It is illegal to advocate for secularism or church-state separation, or such advocacy is suppressed since state legislation is largely or entirely derived from religious law or by religious authorities. This is one of the reasons the Center for Inquiry is such an ardent supporter of church-state separation. We can't have religious institutions writing our laws and determining our freedoms. Furthermore, the Humanist International Report states, according to Sunni Hanafi jurisprudence, beheading is appropriate for male apostates, while life imprisonment is appropriate for female apostates, unless the individual repents. Conversion from Islam to another religion is apostasy and applicable in the courts. If someone converts to another religion from Islam, he or she should have 3 days to recant the conversion. If the person does not recant, then he or she shall be subject to the punishment for apostasy, be it prison or death. Now, blasphemy, which may include anti-Islamic writings or speech, is a capital crime. Accused blasphemers, like apostates, have 3 days to recant or face death. In the nation of Bangladesh, another repressive country which has seen several secularist voices silenced over the past decade, and where we see a significant number of secular rescue cases, our U.S. State Department reports that under their penal code, statements or acts made with a deliberate and malicious intent to insult religious sentiments are subject to fines or up to 2 years in prison. Although the code does not further define this prohibited intent, the courts have interpreted it to include insulting the prophet, have interpreted it to include insulting the prophet Muhammad. The criminal code allows the government to confiscate all copies of any newspaper, magazine, or other publication containing language that creates enmity and hatred among the citizens or denigrates religious beliefs. The law applies similar restrictions to online publications. While there is no specific blasphemy law, according to the report, authorities use the penal code, as well as the section of the Information and Communication Technology Act and the Digital Security Act to charge individuals for acts perceived to be a slight against Islam. The ICT Act criminalizes several forms of online expression, including obscene material, expressions likely to cause deterioration of law and order, and statements hurting religious sentiments. The Digital Security Act likewise criminalizes publication or broadcast of any information that hurts religious values or sentiments by denying bail and increasing penalties of up to 10 years in prison. So you get a sense of what we're up against and why the program's existence, unfortunately, is just so acutely needed. Now, back in 2006, Free Inquiry magazine, which is published by the Center for Inquiry, and to which some of you may subscribe, ran 4 of the 12 famously controversial Danish Mohammed cartoons inside its April-May issue, while European publications, including Charlie Hebdo, had rushed to reprint the cartoons in solidarity with the Danish tabloid that originally commissioned them. U.S. media adopted a policy of visual silence, reporting avidly about the cartoon controversy, but never showing the cartoons themselves. Free Inquiry was apparently the first U.S. periodical of national circulation to publish any of the cartoons. A controversy, as you can imagine, soon followed. That bold move by our editor, Tom Flynn, who very sadly passed away last year, was a catalyst for CFI's establishment of International Blasphemy Rights Day and the Campaign for Free Expression, which in turn was a catalyst for the establishment of Secular Rescue as a program designed in part to protect those who make their own bold, blasphemous statements regarding religion. As I mentioned, my work as Secular Rescue began in late 2017. The program, as designed, as a somewhat narrow purview, and that it is specifically in place to aid and assist atheist writers and bloggers, as well as secular publishers and human rights activists whose lives are in danger because of their non-religious views. This danger can come in various forms: threats via social media and instant messaging, face-to-face threats from the local faithful and religious leaders, or, which occurs all too often, threats from family members who have little tolerance for apostate relatives, especially those who live under the same roof, be they brothers or sisters, sons or daughters. Too often, these activists are treated like a disease that must be eradicated. Indeed, many apostates are accused of being mentally ill as well, and forced to see psychiatrists by their parents or community members. It's another reason our program exists in the first place. Secular Rescue is there to protect these free-thinking freedom fighters. Try saying that really fast. Free-thinking freedom fighters. It's not easy. Now, is this smaller group of activists, the writers and bloggers, those who put their lives on the line by showing immense public bravery through their words and activism, who find themselves on hit lists and under scrutiny by local security officials and various religious police. In essence, they are the hunted and the damned. It is this group of atheist activists whom Secular Rescue tries desperately to keep safe, either within their own country or by relocation to safe havens. Secular Rescue is able to perform a sort of triage. We're like ambulance drivers in a way, rushing to the scene to provide life-saving aid. But we haven't been in the business, so to speak, at least until the last few years, of providing longer-term support and expensive resettlement options, since our primary focus has been getting people out of imminently dangerous situations. Other organizations and NGOs have specific programs for extended care and resettlements, while Secular Rescue focuses first on the more urgent protection needs. But immense thanks go to our donors and supporters who have upped their financial backing of the program in recent years, allowing us to engage in far more resettlements and relocations, more and more every year as the conditions have allowed for it. Without the generous support of donors, we'd be relegated to the triage. But regardless, our first duty is trying to save those atheist activists who are in imminent danger of death or prison. However, there is great difficulty in securing travel visas and relocating people to safe nations. That work is very time-consuming and detailed, more attuned to the legal profession, which is why we're constantly looking for immigration and constitutional lawyers to assist those apostates who cannot be relocated. And we have come to accept the fact that relocations and permanent resettlements are the hardest things to pull off, even more so over the last couple of years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But again, thanks to the generosity of donors, we've had more successes in this area. Their dollars allow us to reach higher. The general perception of atheist refugees tends to be pretty harsh. Many immigration authorities won't admit that such a danger even exists, denying many asylum claims on the grounds that atheists simply have nothing to fear. For the persecuted atheists whom we serve, bloggers and writers and YouTubers, and in general, the even larger pool of what we call reluctant secular activists who tend to hide their apostasy and non-belief, these individuals are scorned and shamed to the nth degree, castigated, intimidated by society, physically and psychologically abused to the point that fear is all they have left. Now, for most of these activists, reluctant or forthright, the greatest danger tends to originate from their own families, whose sense of honor and unflinching faith are the cornerstones of their lives. Yes, there are extremists and there is mob vigilantism, but for many who renounce their Muslim faith, compared to other faiths, it is families who pose the greatest danger to life and liberty. As can be expected, the living conditions for this endangered group are typically quite severe and have worsened greatly since the pandemic. Indeed, their circumstances were already deteriorating even before right-wing and Christian nationalism became dominant forces here in the States and in parts of the European Union, where Islamophobia, fears, and a general disdain of Middle Eastern and North African immigrants is well entrenched and deepening. Western governments and politicians respond to voters' antipathy toward immigration and refugees, reducing the number of granted visas and beyond that, far fewer asylum designations. Several of our cases have been denied visas to various EU nations simply because they are human rights activists. And if there is a history of threats made against them in their native countries, usually unearthed during background checks, many visa applications get denied because of the assumption that the person will come to a country and request asylum, including here in the United States. Of these fears, I ask, so what? Let them come and seek safety here. That's what America was founded upon. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Now, this general fear, accompanied by the political repercussions associated with immigrants needing a leg up via government assistance, this fear lessens our ability to find safe havens at home and abroad for those activists who seek fresh starts. But in spite of this environment for human rights defenders, Secular Rescue is still able to bring critical aid and comfort to the great many who come to us for help. In fact, the needs are so great and the number of confirmed atheist persecution claims so many that we often exhaust our aid coffers before the end of the year. We tend to operate on a first come, first served basis because the majority of cases face imminent threats. It makes no sense to us to wait and see if there is a more endangered case down the road when we have plenty of them on our plates in the present. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic a couple of years ago also added a layer of difficulty associated with the work itself. We see very high rates of inflation in many Middle Eastern and North African nations, which translates to greater needs because of higher costs for food and housing and travel, longer stays associated with refugee immobility, more aid requests and follow-up requests, quarantines and vaccination mandates in order to cross various borders, and of course, medical care is never cheap. And lastly, higher outlays for legal aid and asylum seeker assistance are always an issue. Some immigration lawyers in the EU charge upwards of $400 an hour, and such fees can really put a dent in our accounts. But we rely on lawyers a great deal to protect the rights of those who suffer persecution. All of these things make our work that much harder. Inflation and currency devaluation in many nations can cut into our capabilities to some degree. In addition, closed borders have cut off escape routes for most, forcing endangered atheists to shelter in place, often in the most threatening of environments, especially the younger unwed cases who cannot break free from controlling devout parents who demand adherence to their religious edicts, or else. Those who renounce their faith openly, either in the public square or on social media platforms, face the greatest wrath at home, predominantly from fathers, uncles, and brothers. The familial beatings for young men are severe. Many are denied promised funds for university, threatened with death, or pushed to take their own lives, while others are thrown out of the house with nothing but a cell phone and the clothes on their backs. The price for their acceptance back into the family fold is repentance and adherence to the strictures of their family's religious faith. For all intents and purposes, this is religious blackmail. For the women who renounce their faith, the punishments tend to be even worse. Vicious and repeated beatings by male family members, home confinement, sexual assaults, stolen passports and cell phones, forced marriages, and a general denial of any rights or dignity. It's no wonder we see so many young women from the Middle East running away from home. Home is hell on earth to them. When family honor is more important than any consideration, we tend to see the worst of the worst when it comes to women apostates in the regions where we operate. Numerous studies confirm the reality of many thousands of non-believers live in self-imposed silence in these Muslim-dominant countries. BBC News conducted a religious belief survey in 2018 in the Middle East and found that since 2013, the number of people across the region identifying as not religious had risen from 8% to 13%. The rise is greatest for those in their 30s or younger, among whom 18% identify as not religious. These percent changes translate into the thousands and growing. Many secular converts are forced to feign religiosity to deflect scrutiny and rumors. They pray and fast and walk the walk for the sake of a low profile. Underneath this charade, they live in fear of being discovered. Yet when we get to know them during the process of investigating various claims, we see they're just regular people, like you and me, seeking a good education, gainful employment, love and friendships, a universal desire to carve out a decent life in peace and safety and optimism, yet they have chosen a different path, a secular path, far from the rejected beliefs instilled during childhood religious indoctrinations, a path they know could cost them their lives. It can mean torture and isolation or years in prison, not to mention the public persecution and shame that is heaped upon so many of them for the simple reason that they have chosen to abandon their coached / indoctrinated faith. And it is their right. No one can demand religious convictions. I was raised similarly by my parents, taught to believe in supernaturalism and subjected to a system of belief since before I could even tie my shoes. Though still uncommon, public acknowledgement of atheism is widely considered to be growing in these regions. However, when such large percentages of the faithful in these places approve of the death penalty for apostasy, a just punishment for those who leave Islam, it is difficult to get an accurate count on the number of atheists in countries where these horrific blasphemy laws and societal norms are enforced, either by the state, by religious leaders, or the faithful. I suspect there is a tipping point on the horizon, but when that will occur is difficult to guess, if it will occur at all. There were hopes the Arab Spring would usher in a more tolerant and progressive view of religion and belief, perhaps even a reformation, but that time is come and gone. And any notion of a free thought summer appears to have evaporated. And despite what I've seen, all the misery and the oppression, there's a part of me that still hopes for change, a change in attitudes, and for the acceptance of atheism and scientific naturalism to take hold without prejudice or malice or hatred. At this time, I wish to switch gears a little bit and discuss our process. Now, what I mean by that is how we learn about cases, and what steps we take when someone comes to us for help. How do we decide? How do we proceed with a prospect case? What methods do we use to make determinations about persecution claims and so forth? A good deal of this is spelled out at our website, where we post our assistance application, which is, excuse me, currently on a temporary pause, as Kat and I try to process all the applications that have come in from Afghanistan, of which there are many. Even when our online application is suspended from operations, we still see an enormous number of referrals from the other organizations that often pass on prospect cases to Secular Rescue, which is certainly a compliment to the work we do, but overcapacity is one of our main issues. To be fair, is the same issue with all such funds and NGOs that engage in humanitarian activities such as these. Every case manager we know is experiencing the same deluge of cases. Our mantra in response to the constant overload is, we do what we can do. That's just a reality we have to accept. We do what we can do. We save who we can save. Alas, we cannot save them all. Now, in this stage and age, we see just as many poverty migrant applicants as we do persecuted secular activist applicants. But our mandate is clear and specific to these three prerequisites. One, the applicant must be non-religious or an atheist. Two, the applicant must have been subjected to violence and vigilantism or be under threat of violence or incarceration. And lastly, number three, the applicant must engage in or have engaged in secular rights activism of some kind, no matter the degree. This includes activism associated with those whom we label as reluctant activists. Additionally, it is incumbent upon all applicants to be able to support their claims by providing sufficient evidence and references who have an intimate knowledge of the applicant's non-belief, activism, and related predicaments. The inability to provide proof of persecution or threats or proof of some form of secular rights activism will likely disqualify applicants from receiving financial assistance or grants from Secular Rescue. We have to draw a line somewhere. So these are the basic guidelines we use when we are contacted. For instance, an initial contact, usually an email direct from a prospect or relayed to us by a colleague or from another organization, may be a quick request for help, or it may be a lengthy recitation that details the person's entire claim. Here's a true example of a request that made its way to me. I've masked some names and locations for safety reasons. I am X. 28 from Iraq. I have been through a really hard life of being a refugee for almost 10 years in Egypt, then 3 years in X. After I've renounced Islam, become atheist. Currently, I'm stuck in X. I can't work, study, or even simply open a bank account, while the police every 2 weeks come to check on me like I'm a terrorist. I can't survive an X like this. I am unemployed despite having a bachelor degree, and the government treats me with racism simply because I'm from Iraq. And even though I already become an atheist, I can't go back to Iraq. Or this one. Hello, I am X, an Afghan journalist. I do not believe in Islam, but I am in Islamic and extremist society. The Taliban are coming. I'm extremely under danger and I want to leave my country. This life is very difficult for me. I lost all my hopes, just waiting for my physical death, and I have no one to help me. Please, please, please help me. Show me the way to survive my life and hopes. I left my country and my job. I arrived in Pakistan, but I cannot be here for a long time. I face financial problems. I have no chance of work, education. I cannot live here. All my hopes died, and I'm just waiting for my physical death. I'm waiting for someone to help me and save my life. Or this one. Hello, my name is X. I'm 36 years old. I live in Egypt. I'm an atheist. I need assistance. My life is in danger. I want help to travel to any country so I can apply for asylum there. I need to apply for asylum. Please help me. I ask confidentially to preserve my life and the life of my family. Or this one. I'm hiding in Georgia now. That would be the Republic of Georgia. And my family and the Saudi government are chasing me. My family is threatening me. They will kill me. My passport will end in 11 months. After this, I'll have to return to Saudi Arabia, and they will put me in jail for the rest of my life if my family does not kill me before this. One of my uncles here is looking for me, and that's why I do not ever go out of the hostel. Sometimes I stay without food for days. Please help me. And just one more example. Hello, I hope you are fine. I am X. I'm 24 years old from Yemen. For more than 3 years, I have been thinking about atheism, thinking that there is no God, which is not acceptable in Yemen. I was severely beaten and threatened with death and slaughter from the residential neighborhood in which I live, especially my family. They threatened me with death and intimidation. They locked me in a cell for 2 days. I am an atheist, and I'm so afraid. A week ago, I ran away with my friend, far from my family, and today I receive a message from my friends that my father will kill me, seriously and in truth. My father is imam of a mosque in the city, and he is one of the extremist Islamic groups in the city of X. I'm in real danger. I wish I had time to share far more examples of first contacts, but in general, that is what we first see. From that point on, if on the surface, the person appears to meet our most basic of criteria, we follow up with the prospect and ask them to fill out our application in order for us to obtain a significant amount of background information. Or if they have done so already, we launch into an extensive vetting process, including requests for evidence that supports their claims, photo IDs, be they passports or national ID cards, their current location, educational background, family information. Are they married? Do they have kids? What is their financial situation? Do they have social media accounts? Can they show us their posts and activism? Do they have any medical issues? What languages do they speak? Have they ever traveled abroad? Are they vaccinated? Have they ever been arrested or associated with any violent protests? Do they have a bank account, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And we inform them that we will be reaching out to the references to ask them questions in order to corroborate claims, threats, and everything in between. After a typically lengthy process of in-depth fact-finding and information gathering and cross-referencing, we come to a point where a determination can be made about providing aid grants or other needs. Every case is unique. The person may need a lawyer to defend against charges of blasphemy. The person may need urgent financial assistance that will allow them to move 200 miles away from abusers or those who are threatening to kill them. The person may be moving from shelter to shelter and in need of money for food or living expenses to get medical attention. The person may be suicidal and despondent and in need of mental health care, which is a vital service we also provide. The person may be facing prison time or worse because of an expected conviction and therefore needs urgent aid in order to leave the country. There are all kinds of needs associated with our confirmed persecution cases. And if we're in a position to help them or to even save them from a terrible fate, we provide it. Our case manager and I do our very best to communicate with every person who reaches out to us, regardless of the circumstances. That in itself is a very tall order. But it's important not to let anyone fall through the cracks. If the prospect situation does not fall under our program's mandate, then we steer them toward other avenues of help, be it information they can use to help themselves or about other organizations that may be in a better position to assist them. If we don't guide them to other funds or organizations, then we often refer them to the Secular Rescue website, where we have compiled numerous resources on everything from visas and passports and travel information to links on education, scholarships, fellowships, student aid resources, and then protection grants, legal aid, asylum and immigration information, human rights organizations, atheist support groups, and money transfer services. So even if someone's situation does not merit direct aid of any kind, there are still all kinds of resources available to them if they have internet access that allows them the ability to access such resources. Apostates and so-called blasphemers usually are the most serious cases we encounter. Some of their stories are horrific and extreme, with very difficult evidence to go with it. Our aid not only brings hope, but real and positive change for this often desperate atheist minority. A few years ago, with great thanks to our donors who make everything we do possible in the first place, Secular Rescue started using some of our budget to provide mental health counseling and life coaching services to cases who were in severe emotional distress, be it trauma or PTSD, anxiety and stress disorders, or those who are suicidal and broken. Nearly every case we refer to one-on-one counseling has turned a corner and emerged from the depths of isolation and fear to find a new lease on life, even if their predicaments are mostly unchanged. When such a large number of our cases report being suicidal or have claimed to have already made attempts, our funding of these specialized counseling sessions has saved lives. We will continue to redirect cases to such services whenever we feel it is warranted. We see it as money well spent because we bear witness to such positive results. As I've said, Secular Rescue is not just about the provision of financial aid. In fact, most of our work is support-based. This includes asylum seeker assistance with visa and passport fees, advice with the filling out of complicated aid request forms, providing referrals and support letters to lawyers and organizations and immigration officers for asylum hearings, digital security guidance, and sometimes just being present and listening, and then providing advice about everything. We never turn anyone away. We may not have the money for all those who request or need it, but we also provide emotional support, that sense of community like you have, when sometimes that's all that, sometimes that's all that's needed of us. Indeed, many prospects thank us for simply acknowledging them and their pain, regardless of what is true or not, and regardless of what we can or cannot give them. The simple act of compassion is a tonic for many who have never experienced it. Other than the threats, violence, psychological trauma, and persecution, perhaps the most significant struggle our cases have been dealing with has been the pandemic. Some of our cases have indeed contracted the virus. Some have been hospitalized and yet have no money for such care. Many asylum seekers are crammed together in detention centers or refugee camps where proper hygiene is often difficult or impossible, and the spread of viruses is quite common. It's very hard for Secular Rescue to provide safe and clean havens if cases are forced into shared shelters and encampments, and many are jammed together with Muslim refugees escaping wars and famine back home. When they see our cases not praying 5 times a day, danger looms. And as can be expected, a large part of our work involves us asking difficult, probing, and personal questions. We are, after all, investigators. And it's one of the most important aspects of our work. It is incumbent upon us to dig deep to uncover the facts. And our esteemed case manager is particularly good with her investigative processes. And her efforts, that'd be Kat Parker, her efforts have made Secular Rescue a much better program in this regard. And I wish to acknowledge the great work she does on behalf of the integrity of the program. Kat Parker has made me better at my job as well, and I'm thankful for that. Now, beyond our ability to save lives, provide protection services or housing and living expenses aid, I think it's our program's empathy and kindness. The respect we show others who are feeling great despair and isolation. I feel this area is nearly as important as the aid. What I've called our subliminal positivity. This is an area where we flourish. I think it's our admission that we are the lucky ones, and the needs of these at-risk non-believers who jeopardize everything to be who they want to be, to believe what they choose to believe or not believe, something my generation has never had to fight for in a war or in the streets. We are the lucky ones. In this sense, Secular Rescue continues to be a program of hope, one that delivers something more than dollars and support letters and referrals, we convey a very important truth to this mostly secret underground society, that they are not alone in their non-belief, that they are part of a vast and expanding community. In this light, they can feel a sense of belonging instead of isolation. And I think this is one of the great strengths of our program, and not something to be taken lightly. Yes, we provide financial aid, but we also provide comfort to those who are wide-eyed for trouble, always looking over their shoulders, always feeling some degree of fear and anxiety because of their secular views. Our goals have not changed. Even as the world changes around us, we will continue to advocate for the safety and protection of these atheist activists who risk their lives for the sake of freedom of expression and conscience. Even though the line to our door is long, we will keep it moving. We'll do all we can for those whose dire situations fall into our scope. Secular Rescue will be there to mitigate tremendous hardships, to assist free thinkers with aid and other forms of assistance that will help them through incredibly difficult transitions to hopefully positive outcomes. Thank you. I'd like to open up the Zoom floor to any questions you might have regarding the program or our efforts. And thank you very much for your time today and listening. Thank you.
Wow, Matt, thank you. Thank you so much. We've got some questions coming in already. I just let's start with John Peters' question. And here it is. I'll read it. You have incredible specific information on your atheist victims. Do you ever think what would happen if you were hacked and that information leaked? Have you taken extra precautions for information protection?
Yes. Both Kat and I, other than using encrypted, forms of communication, for messaging, text messaging, so on, use virtual private networks, and we keep all of our case information on secure servers that the Center for Inquiry protects.
Okay.
And so, we have information has been leaked before, but it's usually come from other organizations that are sharing information, and that kind of stuff does happen, and we're conscious of those, those instances. Usually I don't, I have not been hacked. Kat has not been hacked, at least to my knowledge. And some people get angry when they feel they're eligible and they meet all our requirements and we don't give them money, and they'll be like, why are you not helping me? And we'll get some attitude back and things like that. We've had a few people that would, with backhand threats to us and so on. We just have to let those things go. We have, we have two lawyers at the Center for Inquiry who protect us and most of the work and from cases like that. And, our CEO also, is like, if anyone's coming at you, don't worry, we got your backs. So a lot of the, the information that can be, that might be sought after is well protected on our servers and so forth. So, I use a virtual private network all the time. I'm using one right now. And, I also use different email accounts. I use a Proton Mail account for encrypted communications, and, some of the other encrypted software mechanisms that are out there are designed to protect us. It's incumbent upon my web team back in Amherst, New York, to make sure that all of our stuff is protected, because we're not the only targets when it comes to Center for Inquiry. Everyone gets some scrutiny from just because of the work that we do. So we do all we can to protect that information. Leaks happen, but they're usually leaks by other activists. It's called doxing. It's like someone will go out and out somebody publicly, saying that person is a apostate or an atheist. They'll do it online because they're trying to get that person in some kind of trouble. So that hasn't, we haven't had hacks that I'm aware of, but it's definitely a concern.
Okay. Jeff is at Friendly House and wants to come on from Friendly House. Come on in there, Jeff.
Okay, thank you, Matt. This is a great presentation on a much needed program, and I've looked at secular rescue from afar for a little while. I'm Jeff Strang, who's emailed you and spoken to you a
Yes.
little bit on the phone. Are there any partnerships secular rescue makes with local groups in the U.S. to support apostate or blasphemous immigrants or refugees here in the U.S.?
Yeah. At this time, I cannot think of any connections we'd made with groups in the United States who've stepped forward and said, we want to sponsor an endangered refugee or family. I think a lot of times it's because it's been so difficult and the process takes too long to get people into the United States. So to answer your question, no, we have not linked up with any groups in the States. We have linked up with groups in Canada. There's a secular group in Calgary that is sponsoring a Pakistani rights activist. But the thing is, the money is all there, all the paperwork is in process and so forth. But still, the guy's been waiting for 3 years, waiting to gain entry into Canada, though he's passed every hurdle that he needs to jump over. So a lot of times, the urgency is so great that we often can't wait for the 2 or 3 years it takes to go through the immigration process. So we haven't linked with anyone in the States as far as groups. It's very difficult. In Canada, we work with a couple of different groups. One would be the Canadian Unitarians for Social Justice. They're located in Nova Scotia, and Rainbow Refugees, who work to protect a lot of the LGBTQ community who suffer greatly in those countries. But the waiting time is so long that we often don't engage in that work. That's something that's starting to happen. That's something that we're starting to do more of because we have the financial resources to do it. And I might have, to sponsor a family of 3 or 4 in the United States, you have to secure this money up front, and it's probably in the $20,000 to $25,000 range. But the process takes too long, and usually while they're waiting in whatever country they're in, I'll take my Pakistani case who's going to Canada. While he's waiting in this third country, he's not allowed to work. He has to live on the support of various organizations that will donate to those organizations for the sake of his living expenses. So it can take years of that. And it's really hard for secular rescue, which focuses on the immediate danger, to kind of work with the long-term, relocations and resettlements. It takes too long. Immigration departments everywhere, the bureaucracy and the foot dragging really make it tough to do those in a time frame that is that will help the family, because they're in danger all the time. And so we can't have them waiting and going from house to house for 2 or 3 years. That's very difficult. And we have a case I have a couple of Iranians in Indonesia. They've been waiting 9 years for resettlement. I think they were going to go Australia initially, and then there was a paperwork, some kind of bureaucratic follow-up. So we switched gears with them and trying to help them get to another country where the waiting time was 8 to 18 months. Now, for them, they've been able to kind of take care of themselves. They haven't needed assistance. So that's worked in our favor. We haven't had to dip into our limited resources to help them pay rent, food, and so forth. So, I would really love to do that. I'd love to find a way to get the U.S. Customs and Immigration Naturalization Services to speed up their processes for those who are in danger. They can't request asylum here till they actually get here. So, there's a difficulty that way. It's tough, but short answer is we don't have any constituent or groups of 5 in the United States that who were able to do this, or at least where our cases can wait that long for it to happen.
We have a question from Pat. First, a compliment. What an amazing program. Has your staff been subjected to any credible personal threats?
Not that I'm aware of. I have on occasion asked the higher ups at the Center for Inquiry if they have been contacted by the FBI or anyone about any kind of threats. To this date, I have not received any direct or targets or threats. I've had people denigrate me on social media and so forth, which, which is the place to do it. I mean, people just abuse the heck out of each other on social media. So I've had people attack me there or attack the program. And typically you just got to let that stuff roll off your shoulders. Now, if the threats get severe enough, we would do what we ask our cases to do when they're being threatened. That is to contact the police to, get it in the record, because those are the kind of things that you want to be able to pull up when you are able to request asylum. That's the kind of evidence you would need. But I think, Kat Parker, she is probably, because she deals with probably twice the caseload that I have, she's probably been subjected to, attitude, people can get pushy. I mean, considering the conditions and difficulties that we're in, it's kind of expected. They're desperate, they're despondent, they're at wit's end. And if things aren't rolling for them, they can get angry and they might hurl some insults and things of that nature. But threats, we've received some, a few, but I wouldn't call them direct threats. They would just be people getting upset and saying they're going to go on social media and, criticize. We just have to accept that that's out there.
Okay. I have a question from Joyce and also a compliment. I'm very moved by the positive approach you take with victims. You do wonderful work.
Thanks.
This is a sad question, but are you aware of folks who have disappeared while you were going through the vetting process? This is a question from Joyce.
Yes. Yes. Disappeared, tortured, executed. Yes, especially over the last 6 months, we've seen, a lot of cases from Afghanistan. There were a lot of secular and pro-democracy groups who were, operating in the country before the fall to the Taliban. And when the Taliban moved into Kabul and started to establish themselves around the country, they started looking for atheists. They started looking for people who worked with the US government. They started looking for former military who were working with the government that was in place at that time. And I would say a number, even as recently as within the last few weeks, they'll be taken by the Taliban and disappear. Some of them have been, executed and so forth. Some of my cases who were I in contact, this is again in Afghanistan, some of those cases who I've been in contact with suddenly disappeared and they stopped reaching out to me. And I might reach back to them and say, hey, I wanted to see how you're doing and see if you got to wherever or what your needs are. And if they don't respond, we don't know. We just don't know what happened. But yes, that does happen. That does happen.
Okay. Question from Wayne. How many people do you help each year? Average.
Well, as far as I think since 2017, our numbers, have just been going up, especially, for a while we had our volunteer case manager, Melissa Krawcheck. She was helping with cases. And so I was alone doing the work for a couple of years, and I had some volunteers. But when we brought Kat Parker on board as the official case manager, it really helped our ability to up the number of cases that we're able to help. Help can be in all forms. I would say every year we probably, the numbers have gone up. Every year we probably provide some kind of assistance, either digital security guidance or, things of that nature, from information to money, probably anywhere from 150 up to 200 people per year. Now that could just be a quick, like a 2 days, where you get messages where you're helping 3 people do something, and that's the kind of help they get. And this year, in the first quarter of this year alone, we spent a lot of money on secular rescue cases. And we also have something called the Afghan Refugee Fund, which is specific to those in Afghanistan that we're trying to help. And we are in Afghanistan, I think the numbers are around 75 up to 100 different Afghans receiving all kinds of support, from financial to help with paying for safe houses, to paying for visas and passport renewals and things like that. Secular rescue cases are cases that happen everywhere else in the Middle East and North Africa. And so far this year, there's been, in the first quarter, there must be at least 24 up to 30 or so cases who've received direct aid of some kind to help them move away from their town to another town, to get away from whoever, the locals in town who are threatening to kill them, and so forth. So I would say every year, our capacity to help has gone up, and our ability to actually do the help and make it happen has gone up. So we have, gone from helping dozens to actually helping, 100 to 200 a year. It is busy and constant. I have 100 and I don't even know how many unread messages on my one account. And then my other account, I have, 200 and something. It takes time, and, it's tough. Like I said, it's hard to get to everyone. We help as many as we can. I would say on a daily basis, we're helping 5 to 10 each daily. And, and then it's follow up, because there's a process with some cases, depending where they are in the vetting process. And then others can be really quick if they're referred to by another organization who's already vetted the case, and they just need A, B, or C, and boom, we can help them pretty quickly. So the numbers swing around, but it's more and more every year.
Yeah. And as you get more known and you do a good job, you get more people. It's not, there's hundreds and hundreds that need your help, and then possibly thousands. And as you get better known or succeed, then the word gets out, and the deluge starts.
Yeah, a lot of the cases that we do get are referred to us by other atheist activists who've been helped. Said, you know what, my friend here is a secular activist in Malaysia, or just for instance, and this is what happened and so forth, and can you help her? So we used to have this online application, and it was just like, especially when Afghanistan fell, that blew up, and we had so many coming in, we really couldn't handle that load. There's just 2 of us here. So we disabled that. And then people find another way to get to us, which is to contact our communications director or someone in our development department. They're going to go to our website and look for somebody. So it's a compliment to the program that more and more people are coming to us because they've heard of us from other organizations or atheist activists. and think this is the place I can go to get the kind of help I need.
Yeah, and these are very, very brave people. You know, making comment at a cocktail party or a gathering of people at myself. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. That feels like an act of bravery to me.
Yes.
And it isn't. There's nothing brave about that. It's just what I believe. And these folks are risking their lives by making a statement like that.
Yeah. And some of them will come home and the father will say, hey, you know what? Your friend contacted me and said that you had posted that you're an atheist on Twitter or something, and look out. I mean, it's like a bomb went off.
Right.
And then that person is forced to defend themselves to their family or their community or to the religious leader in that community. It's almost like an intervention. They will come at that person and say, hey, what's going on? You need to recant this and repent, or there's going to be, repercussions. So yeah, it is quite an act of bravery. It's something, like I said, we take for granted. It is weird, even for me, who is an atheist, to come out and say I'm an atheist. There's a certain feeling of trepidation that I'll be, there's a stigma in this country about that. So there's some trepidation to just even express that. And I'll tell you, I do not go out of my way to do so.
No, nor do I. Nor do I. Yeah, I mean, I've been going to funerals lately, and saying that you don't believe in an afterlife does not come across at a funeral, and so it's something I don't share. I'm quiet.
Yeah,
but I still want to celebrate the person's existence.
Go ahead.
Oh, you got a question here. Do you think, this is from Joyce Lackey, do you think the fact that these people are non-believers slows down their immigration?
I don't think it's that they're non-believers. That's a good question. I think during the Trump administration, there was really let's slow down immigration from that part of the world, because there's an assumption that they're not non-believers, that they're practicing Muslims. That the non-believers are so few and far between that it doesn't play into that kind of perception. I think what slows down immigration is where they're from. They're from the Middle East and North Africa. We upped our quotas from European nations significantly, to suddenly say, hey, let's let in 100,000 Ukrainians, which I'm all for. But there are significant numbers of persecuted peoples in the Middle East and North Africa, faith or faithless, but they're just as deserving. I don't think the non-believers slow down immigration, but I think immigration departments all over the place see someone's atheism as not being something to be persecuted against, and not something that they should be afraid, that there aren't repercussions that they need to be afraid of. We have two cases. They're Pakistanis. They're rights activists. They're in a country that is in Eastern Europe, and they've been denied asylum 2 times, 3 times. They've been appealing the ruling, and what the country has said, or what the immigration officials who do the checks on these asylum claims will often say is, this person can go back to Pakistan and they're not going to be harmed in any way. We don't see their claim as being valid. So that seems to be more so the problem than the fact that they're non-believers. Though, we do have a problem in this country with how seculars are seen. The right sees secularism as a very negative force in this country, and it depends on who's in power, I think, too. So it's a good question, but I think it's more the our immigration system is very very slow with letting anyone in these days.
But I'll end with Hank Rob's last comment, which isn't a question, just a comment. This is from Hank Rob. I don't mind risking burning in the next life if I can just avoid being burned in this one. It's comment. That's true. Thanks, Hank. Thanks so much.